Let's continue. Antonio Finch.
Let's talk about education. Starting with Mr. Scott. Earlier this year, Governor Christ vetoed legislation that would have directly tied teacher salaries to student performance. If you're elected governor, would you sign that measure if it came back next year, or would you change it?
Sure. You know, I put out a specific education plan, and my education plan starts like this. Our education has to be, this is exciting, it's for the benefit of our kids. Every child in this state has the same opportunity I had. I started in public housing. I've lived the American dream. Every child in this state has that same opportunity. But what we've got to do is we've got to look at every child as an individual. Each teacher has to be measured on their effectiveness moving that child from this level to this level. And we've got to compensate them in that manner. We also have to make sure we train our teachers the best way we can. Next, we need to make sure that our parents have all the choices possible. Just because you live on this block doesn't mean you need to go to this public school. You should have the choice of a charter school. You should have the choice of homeschooling, virtual school. We've got to make sure there's more choice. Now, my opponent in her education plan does not use the word choice one time. So we have got to make sure we do this. It's for the benefit of kids. We measure our teachers. We got to pay the best teachers who are most effective the most and give as much choice to our parents as possible.
Ms. Sink.
I'm sorry.
Same question.
Excuse me.
Let me just clarify. Do I get a response to this?
Yes. A full minute 15.
Thank you. Well, Rick didn't really answer the question because you asked the question about whether or not he would sign the same legislation that went through the legislature last year. And I've been very clear that I would not sign a bill like Senate Bill 6. And this is the reason why. It's because while parts of the bill provided for performance pay and merit pay for teachers, something which I very strongly agree with, all the school boards, the superintendents, the parents, the teachers around this state recognize that legislation for what it was, which was, it was nothing more than a Tallahassee bureaucrat and politicians taking over control of our local schools. I would never sign a bill like that. My plan is comprehensive. I put together a 27-page education plan because, I'm a proud...
How do you call for accountability, which you do call for in your agenda?
Oh, absolutely.
What specifically?
I do call for accountability. The way to put together a performance pay plan is to get all the stakeholders around the table and you build out what you think are the most important factors. It can't be just one thing like a test given on one day. I would build out a number of factors and I would test it out because in my company, I never would have rolled out an incentive compensation plan statewide without knowing whether it would really work and result in the right behaviors. I would have tested it out just to be sure that it was working correctly with the results which we want, which is better performance from our students.
Thank you, Ms. Sink. Adam Smith.
Switch gears to Ms. Sink. One of the things that Mr. Scott has brought up, he's raised questions about whether you're willing to take responsibility. So let's go over a few controversies in your past. Recently, licensing ex-felons to sell insurance, bad pension investments while you sat on the oversight board, Nations Bank employees selling questionable securities from the lobby of Nations Bank while you were Florida president, audit problems at Sykes Enterprises while you were on the company's audit committee. Tell us about that. Do you take responsibility for any of those?
I take responsibility for all of them. And let me just go through what I do take responsibility for. In the licensing issues, we have a division of insurance agent licensing. I went back to check these charges that were made. And in every case, our lawyers and our agency licensing people have assured me that they're doing what I expect, which is to follow the laws that have been on the books for 40 years and follow the guidelines and the rules which were passed in 2002 and signed by Jeb Bush. We play by the rules and we follow the laws. When it comes to the state pension fund, Rick Scott is trying to blame me for the global collapse of the stock market. Well, that just is not going to carry water. The fact is that our state pension fund is one of the 4th strongest funds in this country, and all he did was he's played all these ads to scare seniors because they've been talking to me about it, and they're afraid that they're not going to get their pensions paid.
Before you
That's
move on
irresponsible.
from the pensions, though, there was a drop of a third in the value of the pensions in a matter of 6 months, of course, at the time when the economy was tanking. But you had warnings that some of the investments were in risky securities. Why was nothing done about that?
Well, the problem there was that the executive director of the pension fund did not do his job and did not inform his board members that he had a problem with some investments. And you know what? I held him accountable and I asked for his resignation, and we've hired a new director who has the qualified experience to run a pension fund. So yes, I hold people accountable to do the jobs that they're expected to do. And I just want to, you know, on this whole pension fund issue, isn't it something that Rick Scott would accuse me of being responsible for a global financial collapse when our own state, our state of Florida, sued Rick Scott personally for insider trading and defrauding the shareholders, of which our state pension fund was one of the major shareholders.
Mr. Scott, on Columbia HCA's, which is referring
Can I respond to this, though?
I think you can do it in this answer. HCA, company you led, as we all know, paid a $1.7 billion fine for Medicare fraud. Either you knew about the major problems in the company, apparently, or you were ignorant. How are either of those alternatives make you qualified to be governor of the state?
Okay, so first let me respond to what Ms. Singh said. First, on the guidelines on the convicted felons. She didn't follow her guidelines. Go to factsforflorida.com and you can see a list of people that she didn't follow the guidelines, and she could have changed the guidelines and she didn't. Second, on the pension fund, she was told multiple times, she was warned that they were in too risky investments, and she didn't do anything about it. She waits until after the fact, and then she says there's something to do about it. Third, she talks about insider trading. That lawsuit was dismissed completely. Now, in contrast, when she was at Nations Bank, when her tellers were paid kickbacks for referring elderly citizens from safe bank deposits to risky ones, they were fined by the state and they were sued by the state. Second, when she was one of 2 audit members of Sykes, and the company falsified its accounting, they were sued by the state pension fund, and they did pay fines. So there's a big difference. In the insider trading case, mine was completely dismissed.
We'll allow for a rebuttal, 30 seconds.
Well, the facts on the insider trading case is that Rick Scott sold millions of dollars worth of stock in his company, Columbia HCA, just days before the company was raided by the FBI and eventually charged with 14 felony charges. These charges that he is telling the people of Florida about me, the lawyer that brought the suit against Nation Securities has said publicly, Rick, that I had absolutely nothing to do with it. That was not a company that I was associated with. And you know, the people of Florida, I have to say that the people of Florida have been hearing your charges and your negative, outlandish attack ads over and over again when you have a lot of explaining to do yourself.
Mr. Scott, let's go to the HCA, Columbia HCA question. $1.7 billion of fines. Either you knew or you were too distant as a manager. How you qualified to be governor?
Sure. Well, we built a great company. I started with my life savings, my wife and my life savings of $125,000. Over 9 years, we took the company up to 340
We've heard
plus.
that, though. You've said that already. So explain to me how it went so wrong.
Well, you know, one thing you learned, what I focused on was I focused my efforts on making sure patients were taken care of. I reduced the cost of health care, outcomes were better, patient satisfaction. I clearly could have done a better job of hiring more internal and external auditors to have done a better job in making sure the company completely comply with the Medicare regs. So the lesson I've learned is you have to broaden your focus. You do what Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify, and that's what I bring to the table. In business, what happens is you get better if something goes wrong, you focus on it and you get better, and that's what I've done.
And Mr. Scott, a follow-up. You've talked about openness in government, and you've created another successful company, Solantic, and you had a deposition relating to a lawsuit involving that company just days before you filed to be a gubernatorial candidate. Why not, as part of that openness, allow people to see that deposition?
You know, there's 20 plus million lawsuits filed every year in this country. And if you're the CEO of a company or involved in companies, you know, there's frivolous lawsuits. They're just fishing expeditions. They go on all the time, and by trial lawyers. And you know, those are the same trial lawyers that are backing my opponent. I've elected, that case has nothing to do with my run for governor. I've elected not to release it.
Kelly Dunn.
We're going to revisit education and specifically the FCAT. Mr. Scott, some parents and teachers criticize the FCAT, saying teachers are teaching to the test. Do you believe these tests, the FCAT, are the best way to hold public schools accountable, and are they best for the students of Florida?
Well, we have to have a way that we can measure the effectiveness of teachers from when the child starts with them to when they finish. So we have to make sure that if they're in that class for 9 months, that we measure, and we measure it on a per student basis. Now, FCAT's one way to measure it, and it shouldn't be the only measurement. My second daughter, teaches special needs kids. She clearly has to be measured differently than somebody that teaches a basic subject. And what I've done in business is you start out with a measurement program, and then you constantly upgrade it and constantly improve it. But FCAT is one way to do it, but it clearly has to be, you go from how well that teacher, how effective that was in moving that individual student. You can do it in business. We clearly ought to be able to do it in education.
But overall, do you like the FCAT? Would you change it?
I think FCAT is one way to do it now, and it's fine now, but I'm sure as we can figure out better ways of doing it. And it would only be one measurement.
Ms. Sink, you talked about, when we were talking about Senate Bill 6, about your plan for teacher accountability. Do you think the FCAT does it for Florida?
Well, as a parent, testing was always really important to me. Every year I was always, my son Bert is in the audience tonight and he'll bear this out. I was waiting for those test results to be sure that my children were performing against a nationally norm reference test, and unfortunately I believe the FCAT has kind of gotten away from that. Our children need to be held to national standards, and I think that testing is just one way to evaluate a student, and it shouldn't be done just on one day. We should have ways to evaluate and measure student performance all during the year, so that if you get to November and a child is falling behind in reading or math, you don't have to wait until the end of the year to say, we've got to do some remedial help here. We've got to turn the system around. And you know what, who I'm going to ask? I'm going to ask our teachers and our superintendents and our principals and our professionals what's really important and how they think we ought to evaluate our students, because there are other ways other than just testing. And most people in Florida are sick and tired of the FCAT.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sink. And right now we are going to take a quick break, only 2 minutes before we start another round of questions for the candidates. Decision 2010, before you vote. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Florida Gubernatorial debate from the campus of Nova Southeastern University in Davie. This event is being seen by voters across the state. We will get right back to the questions and our panel. Antonio Finn's next question.
Thank you. On immigration, the next governor is likely to face legislation that could require police and law enforcement in Florida to check the immigration status of people they suspect are here illegally. Is this a good idea or a bad idea? Starting with Ms. Sink.
Thank you. We Americans are all, is that my code?
It's not.
Sorry.
There we go.
Okay. Sorry.